I'm fortunate enough to live in an area where there is an ATSC 3.0 broadcast. I'm only about 15 miles away from what is dubbed the 3.0 Lighthouse for Buffalo, WNYO, and I'm able to receive everything being broadcast. I've done many tests, such as with its response to multipath interference, decoding various SNRs, and the quality of the broadcast itself. ATSC 3.0 is still in the early stages of broadcast, and it's got a long future ahead of it. Join me as I explore ATSC 3.0 and the broadcast of it in Western New York. Today I'll be discussing ATSC 3.0, the future of over-the-air TV broadcasts in the United States. Alright, so as a point of reference, let's look at ATSC 1.0. So the SNR of ATSC 1.0 is 15.2 decibels, and this can carry a maximum bit rate of 19.39 megabits per second. The modulation used is 8 VSB. But the way that I think about this is if you're in a bubble of 15.2 or greater, then you're good. With this standard, there's just the one SNR. The SNR is the point at which the FEC has too many errors for it to correct, in which it will no longer be able to decode a good signal. Alright, so that's ATSC 1.0. Alright, so right away, getting this out there, if you don't know, ATSC 3.0 allows for transmission of up to 4K at 120 frames per second, and in the future, it is upgradable for 8K broadcasts. There's a bunch of circles and all these numbers. Let me dissect it a little bit for you. So the SNR of ATSC 3 isn't just one defined point like 1.0. It isn't 15.2. It can range from negative 5.5, which is insanely robust, all the way up to 36.5 decibels, which honestly would have the range of a cell tower, but I'll get into that later. So this would just be a hypothetical, this demonstration that I'm giving you with these circles would be a hypothetical situation with 4 PLPs. So what a PLP is, they are physical layer pipes, and they can supply different video in the same 6 megahertz channel. So it's different than traditional multiplexing. PLPs have different SNRs. So one SNR may be very robust, the other one maybe not so much. Let's look at this scenario. So this hypothetical situation has a lowest PLP with a decent range. So you can see all these houses which represent RX receive locations. And you can see that the first house has an SNR that they're picking up, a high enough SNR in order to get the 4K at 120 frames per second video. Now, the second house and the third house and the fourth house, their SNR is not high enough. Again, this isn't based on mileage or kilometers away from the transmitter. If you have an antenna with higher gain or low noise, SNR is a ratio. So it depends on your equipment that you're using, and also depends on the noise in your area and how far away. So this is just kind of like a bubble representation of what people would be getting. Also, it's important to note, the more robust it is, the less stuff you can put in the 6 megahertz band, if that makes sense. Also, depending on the SNR, the bit rate can vary from 1 megabit per second all the way up to 57, which is insane. Lastly, OFDM modulation is used, which is way better than 8 VSB. It handles multipath interference so much better. Alright, here's a comparison of multipath interference from 1.0 and 3.0. The TV is displaying the ATSC 1.0 and the iPad on the bottom is displaying the ATSC 3.0.
Turn it back, I'll be fine. Miles enough.
Alright, so for this next hypothetical situation, this is what I call ATSC 3.0 extremes. This would have a negative 5.5 decibel SNR, in which you would only be able to have a quarter HD or 540p stream at 30 frames per second. I mean, this is so low that we could actually start comparing this to NTSC broadcast analog, which I know may excite a few people. But ultimately, I am unsure how this would compare, mainly just because I would have to set up an NTSC broadcast alongside a negative 5.5 decibel ATSC 3.0 broadcast, which in the future, if there is a modulator that can spit out a 3.0 signal that has that robust of an SNR, I could try to compare it on the same frequency, same output power, and use two different coaxial cables and gauge, how far is that signal going. I could test all of that out once the equipment is available, but as of right now, there's no way for me to tell. Also, I don't think I need to explain what the TRAPO implications are or eSkip implications are for something like this. That'd be pretty cool. Alright, so this is now the complete opposite of what I was just talking about a second ago. This would be if you had the highest possible SNR, which is the lowest possible range. And I think I had said earlier that it would be like having the range of a cell tower, and that's not too far off. You could possibly get 10 4K channels or up to 100 quarter HD channels in the same 6 megahertz band. That's insane. But again, the coverage would be very poor. So it's a trade-off. The higher the SNR, the more stuff you can put in that 6 megahertz band, but the less range it has. The poorer the signal, the more range you have. So it's a trade-off. And broadcasters have been usually kind of doing a middle ground, which leads me to the next topic. Alright, so here's a representation with actual stations. This is what my local ATSC 3.0 station WNYO is like. From what I can tell, it has 3 PLPs, with My TV Buffalo being the most robust, Fox 29 being very robust as well, but just not as robust. And then 2, 4, and 7 there are the least robust and have been the hardest to get in. These SNRs aren't a whole lot different than the current ATSC 1.0 standard. It's hovering around the 13 to 16 decibel range for these 5 stations, with My TV obviously being the lowest and those 3 stations on the top being the highest. But there really isn't that much of a difference right now. In the future, that may change. So I've heard that many people, especially in Canada, are able to get My TV Buffalo and Fox 29, but are not able to get channels 2, 4, and 7 that are in the less robust tier. And that is just because it takes a higher SNR in order to get these stations in, even though it's on the same 6 megahertz band. Thank you for watching this quick overview of ATSC 3.0 by Western New York over the air. Follow the links in the description of this video to check out if your area has ATSC 3.0 available. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them down in the comment section below. Since by law, many ATSC 3.0 channels need to coexist with ATSC 1.0 for a set amount of time, both ATSC 1.0 and ATSC 3.0 have to fit in what's left of the scarce public TV airwaves, previously only made up of ATSC 1.0 stations. This creates a problem. How does a broadcaster keep ATSC 1.0 broadcasts on the air while broadcasting in ATSC 3.0? When WUHF switched to ATSC 3.0 in March of 2023, here's what happened. Using Sinclair's WUHF, Rochester will have ATSC 3.0 versions of its CBS, ABC, PBS, and Fox affiliates. In order to make this happen, channels that are currently on WUHF's existing ATSC 1.0 signal will be added to various stations broadcasting on Pinnacle Hill. WUHF's Fox Rochester will become a subchannel of Nexstar's WROC. Antenna TV and Comet TV will become subchannels of Sinclair's WHAM, and TBD will become a subchannel of WXXI's WXXI. Essentially, for having a broadcaster's channel on the ATSC 3.0 signal, the agreement is the respective broadcaster will add a former WUHF subchannel to their station. This way, WUHF's programming stays on the air in ATSC 1.0, and in return, those other broadcasters get their main channel on an ATSC 3.0 signal in addition to their own ATSC 1.0 signals. These channels magically fit on other stations with lossy compression. If you didn't already know, ATSC 1.0 primarily uses H.262 or MPEG-2 Part 2 for video, which is an incredibly inefficient codec that came out in 1996. Compound this with the fact that ATSC 1.0 can only fit 19.39 megabits per second, and the video capabilities are incredibly limited while using MPEG-2 video. When WTVJ transitioned to ATSC 3.0 in January of 2023, its main HD channel, NBC, got displaced onto NBC Universal's other station in Miami, WSCV. WSCV now has two 1080i channels and four 480i channels. Since switching to WSCV, NBC has an average bitrate of 6 megabits per second, with it dipping as low as 3 megabits per second. To give you an idea, DVDs have 480p MPEG-2 video at 9 megabits per second. The good thing is, ATSC 1.0 isn't locked to just sending MPEG-2 video. At the end of the day, ATSC 1.0 is just sending ones and zeros. These ones and zeros can be made up of literally any video codec. K03IMD, an ATSC 1.0 station in Eugene, Oregon, is sending 3 4K HEVC channels, one 1080p AVC channel, one MPEG-2 480p channel, and one MPEG-2 1080p channel. Again, this is an ATSC 1.0 station that's sending 3 4K channels using HEVC, not ATSC 3.0. I give this broadcaster a lot of credit for broadcasting video that is not officially part of the ATSC 1.0 standard. But there's an even better codec than HEVC. Versatile video coding, aka VVC or H.266, is the most efficient video compression codec in the world and can send great looking 1080p HD video over ATSC 1.0 at just around 2.5 megabits per second. The equivalent quality with MPEG-2 video is 19 megabits per second. With VVC, a broadcaster could fit nearly 7 more channels of that same wonderful quality in the same 6 megahertz ATSC 1.0 RF channel. VVC is so efficient that you could easily fit a 2-hour-long 4K HDR movie on a DVD. More on VVC in a future video coming soon. But there's a catch. The broadcaster needs equipment to send the codec, and the consumer on the receiving end needs equipment to decode the codec. MPEG-2 video has always been a part of the ATSC 1.0 standard since 1996, and AVC video was added to the standard later on. This means most relatively modern ATSC 1.0 devices will support MPEG-2 and AVC, but many legacy ATSC 1.0 devices may only support MPEG-2. Devices like the HD Home Run are the most future-proof because they don't decode any video or audio. HD Home Run simply tune the ATSC 1.0 or ATSC 3.0 waveform and extract binary code from it. It then sends the code to a client device, so it's up to the client or client app to be able to decode a given codec. That's why in VLC, Dolby AC4 audio won't play from ATSC 3.0 stations, but other apps like channels for HD Home Run will. Not only would I be able to watch the HEVC video from K03IMD using an HD Home Run, I'd be able to watch video from any modern codec like AV1 or H.266 as long as my client app supports it. If it doesn't, it's as simple as the app developer pushing out a software update to include it. Some broadcasters are starting to send out video using AVC on ATSC 1.0, but it's usually just a single 480i subchannel, in a list of many other channels that are MPEG-2. This is done out of fear that many won't be able to pick up channels broadcast using AVC. ATSC 1.0 channels with AVC play back perfectly fine on my $150 on 4K Roku TV, and also play back perfectly fine on cheap ATSC 1.0 3.0 converter boxes under $30. In fact, I couldn't find a single ATSC 1.0 device that I own that couldn't decode AVC video. If all ATSC 1.0 MPEG-2 broadcasts switched to using AVC, overnight, the video quality would double. And right now, many ATSC 1.0 channels are in desperate need of that quality boost. In my opinion, broadcasters should be using AVC way more in their ATSC 1.0 broadcasts. AVC is officially part of the ATSC 1.0 standard, and most consumer devices should be able to support it. MPEG-2 is ancient trash that, when coupled with low bit rates, produces incredibly poor quality video. When I've told my friends in the past about over-the-air TV, most had either never heard of it before or thought what I was doing was illegal. They had no idea what free over-the-air broadcasts are, let alone what the public airwaves are. Instead of utilizing the public airwaves to acquire a legal copy of, say, their local NFL game, many people I know went alternative routes, like using Aereo or Lowcast, or accessing live streams through links on Reddit. What's astonishing is at its peak, Lowcast had 2.3 million users on their platform. And yet, after broadcasters and networks took legal action against Lowcast and others, they never provided a legal alternative. Instead of just squashing every service that pops up, broadcasters and networks should take a step back and go to the root of the issue. Why are so many people using these services in the first place? If so many consumers are going against the grain of paying for traditional TV services or using an antenna, then something is wrong. Consumers have proven time and time again that price and convenience are what they value the most. What did all of these services have in common? They were all free or incredibly reduced cost, and they were available at the convenience of streaming. For those that didn't know about over-the-air TV, for those that didn't want to go through the hassle of setting up an antenna, for those who thought an antenna wouldn't work in their area, for those that had a bad experience with over-the-air TV in the past, for those that couldn't afford or didn't want to pay for cable or satellite services, for those that liked the convenience of simply launching an app, they would turn to services like these. Broadcasters should be making their own version of Lowcast, but not in the way that you might think. Broadcasters have an obligation to serve the public without an internet connection. This means they should use their over-the-air signals as the delivery method for their content to streaming apps, rather than using the internet. ATSC 3.0 at its root is an incredible technology that has the potential to do this. ATSC 3.0 has the ability to broadcast directly to devices without the need for external antennas. Since ATSC 3.0 is IP-based, data broadcast over the air could flow seamlessly into an app. This means a Lowcast equivalent service made by the broadcasters could function identically to any other streaming service that had provided access to local channels in the past. Doing this correctly would not just mimic the experience would be better. Over-the-air broadcasts have advantages over the internet that cannot be dismissed. The inherent nature of broadcasts means that no matter how many people are using the service at a given time, there will never be any capacity issues or buffering. Over-the-air broadcasts are also completely wireless, something that the internet is not. Over-the-air broadcasts inherently travel to areas that would never receive terrestrial internet services due to there simply being a lack of monetary incentives. Over-the-air broadcasts offer unparalleled data privacy since there's literally no return path. Additionally, over-the-air broadcasts are hands down the cheapest way to send internet protocol data out to the public, which trickles down to the consumer level. It's for these reasons why I strongly disagree with individuals who believe that the remaining public airwaves should be sold to cellular companies and that broadcasters should stream their content over the internet instead. Although all of this is possible at a technical level, actually implementing this is more difficult. In order for this to work, devices would need to have built-in ATSC 3.0 chips using the device's built-in antennas. This is one of ATSC 3.0's biggest hurdles and is 5G broadcast's single most important advantage over ATSC 3.0. All it would take is a software update and every 5G smartphone in America would be able to pick up UHF TV stations using 5G broadcast. This is why 5G broadcast is more enticing for smartphone manufacturers and for some broadcasters. Additionally, broadcast would need to be sent with a lower modulation encode rate and/or be sent using a single frequency network. The argument about not having enough data capacity in low modulation encode rate transmissions is preposterous, given ATSC 3.0's inclusion of MIMO and layered division multiplexing, as well as with general advancements in coding efficiency. If broadcasters don't go this route, where the only way to watch their over-the-air content is through an external antenna and is not as seamless as streaming, their ability to meaningfully serve the public will erode substantially, especially with people my age and younger. To summarize, I believe broadcasters should create their own version of Lowcast that is powered by ATSC 3.0. This way, local broadcasts would be so accessible that the alternative, which is piracy, would just simply be less convenient. These are the public airwaves after all. The content on the public airwaves should be as accessible as possible. In the next decade, unless something drastic happens, the amount of people with cable TV will be so insignificant that broadcast retransmission revenue accrued by broadcasters will be virtually zero. If the main purpose for full-powered broadcasters to even broadcast using the public airwaves in the first place is for guaranteed retransmission revenue, what purpose do broadcasters have to continue to provide over-the-air coverage of TV channels without their coveted retransmission revenue? Broadcasters should realize that they are operating on the public airwaves. If a given broadcaster isn't on board for continuing to broadcast without retransmission revenue, they should either modernize their business model or give up their licenses, and give them to broadcasters that actually care about serving the public. I believe sharing these topics are incredibly important. That being said, I'm the only YouTube channel discussing many of these technical topics. If you'd like to support an independent creator like myself, consider joining my Patreon or channel membership.